Explain the key distinctions between animal rights and animal welfare from a legal perspective and how these differences affect animal control measures. Answer. The concepts of animal rights and animal welfare represent two distinct legal philosophies. Animal rights. This viewpoint argues that animals should not be used for human benefit, including for food, labor, or entertainment. From a legal perspective, animal rights laws often advocate for non-interference with the natural state of animals, and their treatment must consider their inherent rights to freedom and protection from harm. This perspective influences legal frameworks that protect animals as individuals, often leading to more restrictive policies in terms of animal use and control. Animal welfare. This philosophy focuses on the humane treatment of animals within human society. The legal framework under animal welfare emphasizes ensuring that animals are not subjected to cruelty, neglect, or undue suffering. Laws such as the Animal Welfare Act in the United States or equivalent statutes in other countries aim to regulate the treatment of animals used in industries like farming, research, and entertainment. It allows for human interventions like controlled euthanasia or relocation, provided it is done in a manner that minimizes suffering. Impact on animal control. Animal rights laws lead to stricter regulations against practices that exploit animals, such as the prohibition of animal testing, certain types of animal agriculture, and restrictions on zoos and circuses. Animal control measures are more likely to focus on preventing harm to animals and enforcing anti-cruelty laws. Animal welfare laws may allow for more lenient measures that permit the use of animals under strict humane conditions, e.g., rescue operations, regulated euthanasia. However, control measures must balance the protection of animal welfare with public safety. Thus, the philosophy chosen influences the type of enforcement and the scope of regulations in any animal control framework. What legal provisions should be considered when handling dangerous animals, such as dogs, with a history of aggression in terms of public safety and control measures? Answer. When managing dangerous animals, particularly aggressive dogs, several legal provisions are critical to ensure both public safety and animal welfare. Local council ordinances. Many local councils have specific ordinances that govern the control of dangerous animals, especially dogs. These may include the requirement for dangerous dogs to be muzzled, kept on a leash, or housed in secure enclosures. The Dangerous Dogs Act in some jurisdictions may also impose penalties on owners whose animals are deemed a threat to public safety. Public safety laws. The law often requires authorities to assess the risk posed by an animal. In some cases, authorities may be required to seize dangerous animals if they pose an imminent threat. Laws may include provisions for immediate intervention in the event of an attack, such as the Animal Control and Public Safety Act, which typically includes authority for animal control officers to remove an animal from a public area if it demonstrates aggressive behavior. Liability and owner responsibility. Legally, owners of dangerous animals may be held responsible for any attacks or injuries caused by their animals. This can include civil liability for damages and even criminal charges under the Animal Cruelty Prevention Act if the animal is found to be inadequately contained or controlled. Euthanasia or relocation. In extreme cases, animal control officers may be authorized to euthanize or relocate dangerous animals to ensure public safety. However, this must be done following legal guidelines that ensure humane treatment and consider alternative options where feasible. Animal control officers must adhere to these provisions when assessing, handling, and determining the fate of dangerous animals. Detailed documentation and adherence to local regulations are essential to avoid legal disputes. Mr. Lee, an animal control officer, is called to a local shelter where a severely injured dog has been brought in after a car accident. The dog is suffering from multiple fractures and internal injuries, and the veterinarian on site believes that euthanasia is the most humane option to prevent further suffering. What legal and ethical considerations should Mr. Lee take into account before proceeding with euthanasia? Answer. Mr. Lee should consider the following legal and ethical considerations before proceeding with euthanasia. Legislation on euthanasia, animal welfare laws. Many jurisdictions have specific laws that govern the practice of euthanasia in animals. For example, the Animal Welfare Act in the US provides guidelines on the humane treatment and euthanasia of animals. Euthanasia must be performed in a manner that minimizes pain and distress, typically using methods that are considered scientifically and ethically acceptable, such as intravenous euthanasia solutions. State and local ordinances. Mr. Lee should consult local ordinances and policies regarding euthanasia procedures to ensure compliance. Local laws may dictate who is authorized to perform euthanasia and under what circumstances, often requiring a licensed veterinarian or a trained animal control officer to perform the procedure. Ethical considerations, minimizing suffering. Ethical guidelines stipulate that euthanasia should only be considered if there is no hope for recovery and the animal is in pain that cannot be alleviated through medical care. Mr. Lee should confirm that all reasonable efforts to treat or stabilize the dog have been exhausted and the veterinarian's recommendation for euthanasia is based on ethical principles of minimizing suffering. Owner consent. If the dog has an owner, Mr. Lee must also obtain consent from the owner, unless the animal is in the control of animal services and the owner is unavailable. In cases where the owner cannot be located, authorities often act in the best interest of the animal under emergency protocols, documentation and reporting requirements. After euthanasia, Mr. Lee must document the incident thoroughly, including the reasons for euthanasia, the veterinarian's opinion, and the method used. He should also ensure that proper reports are filed with the relevant animal welfare agencies, as euthanasia decisions are often subject to oversight. What are the key components of a legally compliant investigation in animal control, and how should officers ensure they adhere to these procedures during their investigations? Answer: a legally compliant investigation in animal control must adhere to several key components to ensure that the rights of both the animals and individuals involved are protected. Legal authority and jurisdiction. Officers must ensure they have the proper legal authority to conduct an investigation. This often involves understanding the jurisdictional limits of their authority, which can vary by state or local law. Search and seizure laws. Animal control officers must respect the rights of property owners under search and seizure laws. For example, under the Fourth Amendment U.S. or equivalent laws in other countries, officers cannot search a private property without consent or a warrant unless an emergency situation exists, e.g., an animal in distress. Interviews and evidence collection. During investigations, officers must follow appropriate procedures for interviewing witnesses, owners, or suspects. These interviews must be conducted in a manner that avoids coercion or violation of individual rights. Additionally, officers should document all findings thoroughly, including photographs of the animals and any relevant conditions, and collect physical evidence, e.g., animal care records, photos of cages. Adherence to animal welfare standards. Officers must ensure that their investigation does not violate any animal welfare standards during the process. This includes ensuring the humane treatment of animals during inspections and following regulations that mandate the proper care of animals during the investigation, reporting, and documentation. All findings, interviews, and actions taken should be documented and reported following local guidelines. Properly completed forms and reports help to ensure that all legal procedures were followed and provide evidence for any subsequent legal actions, such as prosecution or animal welfare enforcement. By adhering to these legal and procedural standards, officers can ensure the integrity of the investigation and uphold public trust in animal control operations. Complaint has been received that a local pet store is keeping animals in poor conditions, including overcrowded cages and inadequate food. What steps should an animal control officer take to investigate and report this complaint in accordance with legal and ethical guidelines? Answer: to investigate and report the complaint, an animal control officer should follow these steps. Initial assessment. The officer should first review the complaint for any specifics regarding the nature of the allegations, e.g., overcrowding, neglect of food, water, lack of veterinary care. The officer may contact the complainant for more details if necessary, ensuring that any sensitive information is handled confidentially. Inspection. The officer should schedule an inspection of the pet store, ensuring that they have the legal right to inspect the premises. If necessary, the officer may need to obtain a search warrant, depending on local laws. During the inspection, the officer should assess the living conditions of the animals, checking for overcrowding, cleanliness, food and water supply, and overall animal health. All findings should be documented with photos and written notes. Compliance with animal welfare regulations. The officer must check the pet store's practices against relevant animal welfare laws, such as Animal Welfare Act provisions, local ordinances on pet care, and any specific animal control regulations applicable to pet stores. The officer should ensure that any deficiencies found during the inspection are directly tied to violations of specific laws or regulations. Reporting. If violations are found, the officer should prepare a detailed report citing the specific laws or regulations violated and recommending any necessary actions, e.g., corrective measures, fines, or animal removal. The report should be sent to the appropriate enforcement body or local council. If immediate action is needed to prevent further harm to animals, the officer may recommend the temporary removal of animals following legal protocols to ensure proper handling and welfare. How should an animal control officer handle a situation where they suspect an individual of violating animal cruelty laws, but the evidence is not immediately clear? Answer: when an officer suspects animal cruelty but lacks immediate evidence, they should proceed with caution and professionalism, following these steps. Documenting initial observations. The officer should document all observations, even if they are inconclusive. This includes taking notes, photographs, and speaking with any witnesses who may have additional information about the situation. Gathering additional evidence. If initial evidence is lacking, the officer can continue gathering more information over time, such as monitoring the situation, conducting follow-up visits, or interviewing neighbors or individuals who may have witnessed the alleged abuse. Legal considerations. The officer must respect the rights of the individual being investigated, ensuring that all actions taken are within the scope of the law. If further investigation is required, the officer may need to consult legal counsel or seek permission from a court to proceed with a search or seizure of animals. Reporting. If sufficient evidence is gathered, the officer should prepare a comprehensive report detailing the suspected violations, supporting evidence, and any actions taken. What role do local council ordinances play in animal control operations, and how should animal control officers interpret and enforce these ordinances in their daily duties? Answer: local council ordinances are crucial in governing the daily operations of animal control officers, providing specific rules and regulations that reflect the needs and values of the local community. Here's how officers should handle these ordinances. Legal authority. Ordinances give animal control officers the legal authority to intervene in situations involving animals. These laws often cover a wide range of animal-related issues, such as leash laws, animal licensing, noise complaints, and dangerous animals. Officers must familiarize themselves with the specific ordinances in their jurisdiction to effectively enforce them. Interpretation. Officers must interpret ordinances carefully, as they may differ from region to region. It's important for officers to consult local government resources or legal advisors if they encounter ambiguous or conflicting ordinances. Understanding the legislative intent behind each ordinance ensures that officers can enforce them consistently and fairly. Enforcement. Animal control officers are responsible for issuing warnings, citations, or orders to comply with ordinances. If violations are observed, officers should follow the procedures outlined in the ordinances, which may include issuing fines, conducting investigations, or even seizing animals if necessary. How do animal control officers balance the principles of public safety and animal welfare when managing situations involving potentially dangerous animals? Answer: balancing public safety and animal welfare is a delicate task for animal control officers. Here are the steps to ensure that both aspects are handled effectively. Public safety first. In situations involving dangerous animals, officers must prioritize public safety. This involves assessing the immediate risk posed by the animal and taking necessary precautions, such as securing the animal, using leashes or muzzles, or even removing the animal from the area if it presents a direct threat. Animal welfare considerations. While ensuring public safety, officers must also consider the welfare of the animal. If the animal's aggression stems from trauma or mistreatment, officers should assess its health and psychological needs. Wherever possible, they should try to relocate the animal to a safe environment or consult a veterinarian. Legal authority. Officers must ensure that their actions comply with legal protocols, such as the Animal Welfare Act or local regulations. For instance, some laws require specific procedures for euthanizing or relocating dangerous animals, and these must be followed carefully. By adhering to these principles, officers can ensure a balanced and humane response to situations involving dangerous animals. What steps should an animal control officer take when responding to a report of animal abuse or neglect, ensuring full legal compliance throughout the process? Answer: when responding to allegations of animal abuse or neglect, an animal control officer must follow these steps. Initial investigation. The officer should assess the complaint, gather relevant information from witnesses, and evaluate the situation from a legal standpoint. Inspection of conditions. The officer must inspect the animal's living conditions, checking for signs of neglect such as malnutrition, improper shelter, or medical neglect. Documentation and reporting. Thorough documentation is essential, including photos of the animals and their environment. The officer must report findings in a written format, citing relevant laws and regulations. Follow-up actions. If the animal is in immediate danger, the officer may seize the animal following legal protocols. The officer should also notify relevant authorities, such as animal shelters or law enforcement, depending on the severity of the abuse. By following these steps, officers ensure that investigations are thorough and legally compliant. When should an animal control officer seek legal action against an animal owner for violation of control laws, and what types of penalties might apply under local legislation? Answer: legal action should be considered when an animal control officer determines that violations of control laws have occurred and efforts to resolve the situation through warnings or fines have been unsuccessful. Types of violations that may warrant legal action include failure to comply. If an owner fails to comply with warning notices or continues to violate control laws, e.g., failure to license animals or maintain proper containment, the officer may seek a court order or legal penalties. Severity of violation. Violations involving dangerous animals, repeated offences, or animal cruelty are likely to result in more severe legal actions, including fines, injunctions, or even criminal prosecution under relevant laws such as the Animal Cruelty Prevention Act. Penalties. Penalties can range from fines and mandatory education programs to the removal of animals and criminal charges in severe cases. In some jurisdictions, individuals found guilty of serious violations may be banned from owning animals in the future. By understanding these criteria, officers can make informed decisions about when to escalate a case to legal action. What are the key behavioral indicators of stress in an animal, and how can animal control officers identify and mitigate these signs during operations? Answer: key behavioral indicators of stress in animals include changes in posture, e.g., crouching, tense body language, increased vocalization, e.g., barking, whining, growling, aggression or fearful behavior, e.g., biting, lunging, retreating, excessive drooling or panting, dilated pupils and self-mutilation, e.g., biting or licking excessively. Animal control officers should use a combination of observational skills and established welfare guidelines to recognize these signs early. The RSPCA Code of Practice outlines how to minimize stress during animal control operations, including methods like using calm, non-threatening body language, providing a safe environment, e.g., reducing noise and sudden movements, and employing humane restraint techniques. Officers should be trained in stress reduction techniques, such as using positive reinforcement for compliance, and be aware of the animal's pre-existing trauma or previous behavioral issues. How can stress in a domestic dog differ from stress in a wild animal during an animal control operation, and why is it crucial to differentiate between the two? Answer: the stress responses of domestic dogs and wild animals can be significantly different due to their varying experiences and adaptations to human environments. Domestic dogs often show signs of attachment-related stress, e.g., panting, vocalization, seeking comfort, and their behavior is more likely influenced by their previous experiences with humans, such as negative associations with past handling. Wild animals, on the other hand, may display flight or fight responses more intensely, with behaviors like hiding, increased aggression, or escape attempts. They may also suffer from more extreme stress responses like self-injury due to a lack of habituation to human presence. Understanding these differences is critical because the management techniques and safety protocols will vary. For example, a domestic dog may benefit from gentle restraint techniques and calming agents, while a wild animal may require containment methods that reduce the risk of injury and further stress. Following the Animal Welfare Act that mandates humane handling practices for both domesticated and wild animals. Mr. Lee is an animal control officer called to handle a stray dog that has been observed displaying aggressive behavior in a residential area. The dog is growling, lunging, and showing teeth. Mr. Lee is unsure whether the dog is frightened or exhibiting territorial aggression. What should Mr. Lee do to safely assess and handle the situation, considering both the dog's welfare and the safety of the public? Answer: in this scenario, Mr. Lee should first ensure the safety of the public and himself by maintaining a safe distance from the dog. He should follow these steps. Assess the dog's body language. Look for signs of fear. G. Tucked tail, crouched posture, ears back versus territorial aggression. G. Stiff body, direct eye contact. Guarding at location. The situation might suggest fear-driven aggression due to the environment. Minimize stressors. Mr. Lee should use calm, non-threatening movements, avoiding sudden gestures or loud noises. He should also use verbal reassurance. Without approaching the dog too closely, utilize humane containment methods. If possible, Mr. Lee can try to secure the dog using a catch pole or safety net, making sure not to escalate the aggression. The use of chemical restraint might also be considered if the situation becomes too dangerous, following relevant laws and regulations on the use of tranquilizers, which vary by jurisdiction. Consult behavioral specialists. If the dog is exhibiting consistent aggressive behaviors, a professional behaviorist should be called in to assess the dog's underlying causes for aggression, e.g., lack of socialization, fear-based behavior, and develop a rehabilitation plan. What are the ethical considerations and guidelines when handling a frightened animal during a control operation, particularly when it shows signs of extreme distress? Answer: ethical considerations in handling frightened animals focus on minimizing stress and harm. The Animal Welfare Act requires that animals be treated humanely with an emphasis on reducing pain and distress. Key ethical principles include humane handling. Officers should use gentle and minimal restraint, avoiding techniques that could cause trauma or psychological harm. Stress management. The environment should be controlled to reduce stress triggers such as noise, crowds, or sudden movements. Use of restraint. Restraint techniques, if necessary, should be used in a manner that ensures safety and comfort for the animal. The use of muzzles or sedatives must be carefully considered, following legislation on the use of tranquilizers and chemical agents, ensuring that it is done in accordance with established protocols for animal welfare. How does territorial aggression in animals impact their management during control operations, and what specific steps can be taken to avoid exacerbating such behaviors? Answer: territorial aggression in animals typically arises when they feel that their space is being invaded. In these situations, animals may exhibit heightened aggression to defend their perceived territory. Management techniques should include avoiding direct confrontation, approaching the animal from an angle that avoids eye contact or challenges to its space, use of barriers, employing fences or nets to create a safe boundary for the animal, minimizing stresses, reducing external stimuli, e.g., by removing loud noises or sudden movements to avoid triggering more intense aggression, training and behavior modification, introducing slow, controlled introductions to human handlers, and establishing positive associations with humans can help in reducing territorial behaviors over time. Which laws govern the use of tranquilizers or sedatives in animal control, and what are the primary ethical concerns associated with their use? Answer: the use of tranquilizers or sedatives in animal control operations is governed by various regulations, including the Animal Welfare Act in many jurisdictions, which outlines the humane treatment of animals, ensuring that sedatives are used only when necessary and in a manner that minimizes harm to the animal. State or local laws may have specific restrictions on the use of tranquilizers, especially controlled substances like ketamine or xylazine, requiring that only licensed professionals administer them. Ethical concerns include overuse or misuse. Sedatives should only be used to prevent harm or facilitate humane handling, not as a shortcut to control the animal. Monitoring for adverse effects. It is crucial to ensure that the animal is closely monitored for any adverse reactions to the tranquilizer and that the animal is allowed to recover in a safe, comfortable environment. What is the relationship between animal behavior assessment and the development of an effective handling plan in animal control operations? Answer: behavior assessment is the foundation of any effective handling plan. By observing an animal's behavior, officers can identify potential risks and understand how the animal may respond to human presence, tools, or environments. This allows officers to tailor handling methods. For example, a dog displaying fear-based aggression may require a different approach than one showing territorial aggression. Ensure safety. The risk of injury to both the animal and the handler is reduced by adapting the plan based on the animal's behavior. Implement behavior modification. Behavioral issues like fear or aggression can be addressed through training, rehabilitation, or adjustments in handling methods. MS. Park is an animal control officer who encounters an injured stray cat in a busy urban area. The cat is hiding in a small alcove and seems fearful, but the officer notices that it is not displaying aggressive behavior. What steps should MS. Park take to safely capture and provide for the cat's welfare? Answer: MS. Park should follow these steps. Minimize stress. Approach the cat slowly and avoid any sudden movements. She should speak softly to avoid startling it. Create a safe environment. If possible, she should clear the area of any distractions or dangers and ensure that the cat feels as secure as possible. Use appropriate tools. MS. Park should use a catch pole or a humane trap to safely capture the cat without risking injury to either party. Provide immediate care. Once captured, the cat should be taken to a veterinary clinic for assessment and treatment, and an animal welfare group should be contacted for rehabilitation if needed. How do animal control officers ensure the welfare of animals in long-term care, and what are the ethical implications of keeping animals in temporary holding facilities? Answer: ensuring the welfare of animals in long-term care involves adequate space for movement and mental stimulation to avoid stress or psychological distress, socialization opportunities, particularly for domesticated animals, to prevent behavioral issues, regular health checks to ensure animals are not suffering from untreated medical conditions, nutritional care that meets the specific needs of different species, The ethical implications of temporary holding include concerns about overcrowding, lack of enrichment, and the potential for behavioral deterioration in animals kept for extended periods. The Code of Practice for Animal Welfare provides guidelines on maintaining humane conditions in temporary holding facilities, emphasizing the mental and physical well-being of the animals. What are the key principles of animal welfare in the context of emergency animal control operations? Answer: in emergency animal control operations, the key principles of animal welfare include minimizing suffering. Animals should be handled in a way that prevents unnecessary physical or psychological distress. Safety: both the animal and the handler must be safe throughout the operation. This includes using appropriate tools and techniques for restraint or transport. Prompt medical attention: animals in distress or injured should receive immediate medical care. Humane euthanasia: in cases where recovery is not possible, euthanasia should be performed humanely following legal and ethical standards. These principles are underpinned by various national and local regulations on animal welfare, such as the Humane Euthanasia Guidelines, ensuring the decisions made during emergencies adhere to the highest standards of care. What are the primary considerations when designing the physical layout of an animal shelter, and how do these considerations contribute to the welfare of the animals? Answer: when designing the physical layout of an animal shelter, several key considerations must be made to ensure the safety, health, and welfare of the animals. The primary factors include zoning for different animal groups. Shelters should have distinct zones for different animal categories, e.g., quarantine, adoption, and medical areas. This separation helps prevent the spread of disease and allows for appropriate care tailored to each group's needs. Quarantine areas. These areas are crucial for isolating animals with potential contagious diseases to prevent outbreaks. Adequate ventilation, space, and access to care must be incorporated. Enrichment and socialization areas. Providing spaces where animals can interact with humans or other animals helps meet their emotional and psychological needs. Safety and accessibility. Ensuring that animals cannot escape and that staff and volunteers can easily access all areas is essential for both safety and operational efficiency. Ventilation and sanitation. Adequate airflow and ventilation are critical to controlling odors and preventing disease transmission. Surfaces and materials in the shelter should also be easy to clean and disinfect. Why is it important for an animal shelter to develop specific infection control protocols, and what should be included in these protocols to ensure a hygienic and safe environment? Answer: infection control is essential in animal shelters to prevent the spread of diseases among animals, staff, and visitors. A well-developed infection control protocol should include sanitation practices, regular cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces, bedding, and enclosures using approved disinfectants are critical to minimize the spread of pathogens. The frequency and methods of cleaning must be specified for each area of the shelter. Personal protective equipment (PPE). Staff and volunteers must wear appropriate PPE, e.g., gloves, masks, and aprons to avoid cross-contamination, particularly in high-risk areas such as quarantine zones. Animal intake procedures. New animals should undergo a health check and quarantine for a set period to monitor for contagious diseases before being introduced to the general population. This minimizes the risk of introducing infections into the shelter. Vaccination and health records. Ensuring that all animals are up to date on vaccinations and maintaining detailed health records can help track potential outbreaks and respond quickly to emerging health threats. Staff training. Regular training on infection control and emergency response protocols ensures that all personnel are equipped to handle potential disease outbreaks, such as parvovirus or kennel cough. Mr. Thompson is the manager of a municipal animal shelter that has recently experienced an outbreak of kennel cough. The shelter has a large intake of dogs from an animal hoarding situation, some of which are showing symptoms of the disease. What immediate actions should Mr. Thompson take to contain the outbreak and protect the shelter's other animals? Answer: in the case of an outbreak like kennel cough, Mr. Thompson should take the following immediate actions. Quarantine affected animals. Any dogs showing symptoms of kennel cough should be immediately isolated in a designated quarantine area to prevent the spread of the disease to other animals. This is a standard infection control measure to stop the transmission. Veterinary care and diagnosis. Ensure that all affected animals receive prompt veterinary care for diagnosis and treatment. This may involve administering antibiotics or other medications as per the veterinarian's instructions. Enhanced sanitation measures. Mr. Thompson should instruct staff to implement heightened sanitation protocols, including more frequent cleaning and disinfection of all common areas, enclosures, and equipment that may have been exposed to infected animals. Limit visitor access. The shelter should limit public access to the animal areas, particularly the dog intake zones, to prevent potential human-to-animal transmission and further stress on the animals. Health screening for new arrivals. Ensure that any new dogs, especially those coming from hoarding situations, undergo thorough health screening before being admitted to the shelter. A longer quarantine period may be necessary for animals coming from environments with poor health conditions. Staff and volunteer education. Brief all staff and volunteers on the signs of kennel cough and ensure they follow strict PPE protocols when handling sick animals. By responding quickly and following these guidelines, Mr. Thompson can limit the spread of the disease and protect the health of the other shelter animals. What role does the Animal Welfare Act play in regulating shelter operations, and how should shelter managers ensure compliance with its provisions? Answer. The Animal Welfare Act (AWAT) is a key piece of federal legislation in many countries designed to ensure that animals in shelters and other facilities are treated humanely. Key provisions of the AWA include standards of care. Shelters are required to meet specific standards of care for the animals, including adequate food, water, shelter, and veterinary care. Shelter managers should regularly review these standards to ensure compliance. Record keeping. The AWA mandates that shelters keep detailed records for each animal, including intake, health status, and adoption history. Managers must implement systems for accurate and timely record keeping. Facility inspections. The AWA requires regular inspections of animal shelters to assess the living conditions of the animals. Shelter managers should prepare for inspections by maintaining clean, safe, and compliant facilities and addressing any deficiencies. Animal enrichment. The AWA emphasizes the need for environmental enrichment, particularly for social animals like dogs and cats. Reporting and accountability. Shelters must report any violations of animal welfare standards to the relevant authorities, including local law enforcement or animal control agencies. How should shelter managers handle financial management and budgeting to ensure the shelter sustainability and resource availability? Answer. Effective financial management and budgeting are critical for long-term sustainability of an animal shelter. Shelter managers can handle these tasks by focusing on developing a comprehensive budget. The shelter's budget should cover all aspects of operations, including staffing, animal care, veterinary services, cleaning supplies, food, and enrichment materials. The budget should be reviewed regularly to track expenses and make adjustments as necessary. Fundraising and grant writing. Given that many shelters rely on donations and grants, managers should develop fundraising strategies and apply for available grants to support the shelter's mission. This includes organizing donation drives, partnerships with local businesses, and applying for government or private sector funding. Cost control. Managers should identify areas where costs can be reduced without compromising the quality of care. This may involve negotiating better prices with suppliers or seeking in-kind donations from local businesses. Revenue generation. Shelters should also explore opportunities to generate revenue, such as offering paid pet adoption services, training classes, or events like vaccination clinics or pet photography sessions. Financial reporting and transparency. Transparent financial reporting ensures that the shelter can demonstrate proper use of funds to stakeholders, such as donors, local authorities, and the public. Managers should ensure regular financial statements are prepared and reviewed by the board or relevant oversight bodies. A solid financial plan helps shelters remain operational even during periods of financial instability and ensures that resources are always available to meet the needs of the animals. What are the key ethical considerations for staff and volunteers working in an animal shelter, and how should these be incorporated into daily operations? Answer. Ethical considerations in animal shelters revolve around ensuring the humane treatment of animals and maintaining professional standards. Key ethical principles include animal welfare. The primary ethical obligation of shelter staff and volunteers is to ensure the welfare of the animals in their care. This includes providing adequate food, water, medical treatment, and mental enrichment. Transparency and honesty. Staff should be transparent with potential adopters about the animal's health, temperament, and history. Misleading adopters can lead to animals being returned or rehomed under inappropriate conditions. Non-discrimination. Shelters should adopt a non-discriminatory approach, ensuring that all animals, regardless of breed, age, or medical status, receive proper care. Respect for clients and volunteers. Ethical behavior extends to human interactions as well. Shelter staff should treat clients, volunteers, and colleagues with respect and professionalism. End-of-life decisions. Shelters must make difficult decisions regarding euthanasia. These decisions should be based on the animal's quality of life, potential for adoption, and overall health. What are the risks associated with overpopulation in animal shelters, and what strategies can be employed to manage this issue effectively? Answer: overpopulation in animal shelters can lead to numerous challenges, including insufficient resources, overcrowding, and poor animal welfare. The risks include health risks. Overcrowding increases the likelihood of disease outbreaks, such as respiratory infections and parasites. The stress caused by living in cramped conditions can also weaken animals' immune systems, making them more susceptible to illness. Behavioral problems. Animals in crowded shelters may become stressed, leading to behavioral issues such as aggression or fearfulness, which can reduce their chances of being adopted. Resource strain. Overpopulation strains shelter resources, including space, food, medical care, and staffing. With too many animals, it becomes challenging to provide individualized care, and staff may be overwhelmed by the sheer number of animals needing attention. Euthanasia. In extreme cases, shelters may face the heartbreaking decision to euthanize healthy animals to make space for incoming animals, particularly in no-kill shelters with limited resources. Strategies to manage overpopulation include spay-neuter programs. Actively promoting and facilitating spaying and neutering helps control the influx of unwanted animals. Partnerships with rescue groups. Collaborating with other shelters and rescue organizations can help transfer animals to areas with more available space and resources. Public awareness campaigns. Educating the public about responsible pet ownership, the importance of spaying, neutering, and adopting shelter animals can help reduce the number of animals entering shelters. Fostering. Encouraging fostering can provide temporary homes for animals, alleviating overcrowding and giving animals a better chance of socializing and being adopted. By implementing these strategies, shelters can better manage animal populations while ensuring the health and well-being of the animals in their care. What is the role of animal shelter staff in preventing the spread of zoonotic diseases, and what precautions should be taken when handling animals? Answer: zoonotic diseases are those that can be transmitted between animals and humans. Shelter staff play a crucial role in preventing the spread of these diseases by following strict hygiene and safety protocols. Personal protective equipment (PPE). Staff should wear appropriate PPE, including gloves, masks, and aprons when handling animals, particularly those exhibiting signs of illness or coming from environments with known disease risks. Hygiene practices. Regular hand washing, sanitizing surfaces, and disinfecting equipment are essential in preventing cross-contamination. Vaccination. Ensuring that all shelter animals are up to date on vaccinations is a critical preventative measure. Health monitoring. Shelter staff should monitor animals for signs of illness, especially for diseases that are transmittable to humans, such as ringworm, toxoplasmosis, or salmonella. Any sick animals should be isolated immediately. Training and awareness. Staff should be regularly trained on the risks of zoonotic diseases and the proper protocols to follow when handling animals and cleaning areas to minimize exposure. What is the importance of developing a disaster response plan for an animal shelter, and what key elements should be included in this plan? Answer: a disaster response plan is essential to ensure that an animal shelter can respond quickly and effectively in the event of an emergency, such as a natural disaster, disease outbreak, or civil unrest. Key elements of the plan include evacuation procedures. Clear procedures for evacuating animals, staff, and volunteers in the event of a disaster should be established. This includes pre-identified evacuation routes and transportation options. Emergency contacts and resources. A list of emergency contacts, including local animal control, veterinary clinics, and volunteers, should be maintained. Shelters should also have a supply of essential resources, such as food, water, and medical supplies for emergencies. Shelter and holding areas. Designated safe areas within or outside the shelter where animals can be temporarily housed during emergencies should be part of the plan. Training and drills. Staff should be regularly trained on disaster response protocols, and drills should be conducted to ensure everyone is familiar with their roles and responsibilities during a crisis. Communication protocols. Establishing clear communication channels for informing staff, the public, and emergency responders is vital. How should an animal shelter manage the intake and assessment process to ensure the health and safety of all animals? Answer: the intake and assessment process is critical for ensuring that animals entering a shelter receive proper care and are not exposed to unnecessary risks. The process should include health screening. Upon intake, each animal should be examined by a veterinarian to assess its health and identify any signs of illness or injury. This helps prevent the spread of disease within the shelter. Behavioral assessment. Assessing the behavior of incoming animals is important to determine if they are suitable for adoption, or if they need special behavioral training. Record keeping. Comprehensive records should be created for each animal, including its health status, behavior, and any special needs. This ensures continuity of care and supports successful adoption. Quarantine. New arrivals should be quarantined for a period to observe for any signs of contagious diseases. This period can vary depending on the animal's background and any potential health risks. Resource allocation. Shelters should assess the available space and resources to ensure they can adequately care for new intakes.